There's only 3 certainties in life that I know of: death, taxes, and hacks. Luckily, you can prepare for all 3. So I want to take an opportunity to relive a day in my past that I actually wish had never even happened. And given that I've just met you, this isn't at all intimidating for me. I want to take you back to Easter Sunday last year. It's been a fairly quiet day for me. My husband and I have enjoyed a very uneventful holiday. We're about to sit down for dinner. I get a text. It's from our chief HR officer. It's somewhat cryptic. It says, "We need to take the site down ASAP. It's really bad." I immediately go to my phone, start looking through my email, and sure enough, I've missed several emails of the past few minutes. And I know this is not going to be a quiet ending to an otherwise uneventful Easter Sunday. Come to find out that McAfee's corporate LinkedIn profile page had been hacked. I go to the page and in horror discover what has happened. A hacker has taken the opportunity to take control of our page and replace our company description and our company postings with the most vile, derogatory, racist, sexist, homophobic, and every other kind of slur you can imagine, weaving a pearl of profanities where our corporate description and our company image once stood. He went one step further. He changed the McAfee logo, the new McAfee logo, and I'll get to that in a minute, with an image of a disgusting graphic image that I will spare you the details of this morning since it's not even lunch yet, and we just don't even need to discuss such matters. But needless to say, when he replaced the logo on our corporate profile page, it also propagated across all of the employees at McAfee who also had a LinkedIn profile to replace the logo on their page, defacing their pages as well. I want to set the scene for you just to put this in context of what a bad day this was. Just a few weeks prior, as Matt indicated, we had spun out from Intel to create one of the world's largest independent pure-play cybersecurity companies. We are paid to defend consumers and businesses around the globe from cyber attacks. It's what we pledge our company's mission to. And here we are in a very public forum suffering an attack of our own. And here I am, the newly appointed CMO of said company, processing in real time on Easter Sunday the gravity of the situation and what I'm looking at. Yes? My heart starts racing. I leap into action. There's no time to think about this. I immediately start making phone calls. First person I call is our VP of Digital. Thank God she was already on the case. But we had to batten down hatches. Here's what we didn't know in those moments. We didn't know if this was a one-off attack by someone pulling a prank on us, or if this was a much more coordinated attack by a legion of hackers who might have had other ideas of where they could embarrass us or otherwise take things from us of value. We immediately had to scan, are there other social properties at risk? What about our executive social profile pages? Was this an attack on company, not just company, but the executives who were just newly appointed a few weeks prior? What about our .com property? Was that safe or was that under attack? What about the company itself? Our CISO had to be informed immediately, lest this be a distraction, a smokescreen, while they took something of real value in the company. All of this is happening real time as we're trying to process what is happening on an otherwise, again, uneventful, quiet Easter Sunday. Turns out our social media manager was one of the first on the case. He was alerted that there were administrative profile changes being made to our account. Good practice, good hygiene. He goes into the account and is equally horrified by what he sees. So what does he do? What would be your impulse? Clean it up. Start cleaning it up. Start refreshing what was there before. The hacker saw him in his footsteps, immediately locked his credentials out. So now we have no one with credentials to our corporate LinkedIn page. All the while, the hacker continues to spew his venom with no control by us. We escalate through LinkedIn. We had already done that, and we're working that process. While we do that, we're calling every executive on the team, telling them what? Immediately go into your social profile, immediately invoke multi-factor authentication if you don't have it already. Immediately change your password, because we do not know, again, the extent to where this could go next. I'm one of those people. I go into my social profile pages. I find an account that I activated well before I joined McAfee and realized what a scary world in which we live that did not have multi-factor authentication on it. I attempt to put it on it several times over the period of a few minutes to no avail. I just can't figure it out. I can't get it working. We're dealing with this LinkedIn, then we got to get this figured out. What do? Desperate times call for desperate measures. This CMO completely deactivates said account, permanently erasing the social history and connections on it. We get back to the LinkedIn. Now here's the good news about being hacked on an Easter Sunday. There's not a lot of news around it. It's somewhat quiet in most parts of the world. Here's the bad news about getting hacked on an Easter Sunday. It's extraordinarily difficult to get it resolved. We're now dealing with LinkedIn's APAC team clear across the world. Why? Because it's Monday during the day for them, whereas it's the middle of the night, Easter Sunday, for our normal team based here. My CEO and I are talking regularly as minutes turn to hours, and we're desperate trying to figure out what is the recourse. He finally calls someone he knows at LinkedIn, able to get in touch with him that Easter Sunday night. And within a few minutes, our account is restored, it's back in our hands, the hacker is out, and we've been able to maintain stability, at least for that night, yes? Here's the good news about working for one of the world's largest cybersecurity companies. We have forensics experts literally deployed around the world that do this all day long. So we have been in touch with our EMEA team overnight, middle of the day their time, letting them know what's going on, and they've already engaged law enforcement and are tracing the hacker's breadcrumbs. By the time I wake up Monday morning, my time, we have an answer as to how the hacker got in. He had stolen credentials from an employee who worked at one of our social media agencies. Her LinkedIn credentials had been hacked years before. If you remember the LinkedIn hack, when millions of users had passwords stolen, and LinkedIn told everybody, yes, change your password now, make sure you update your password. She never did. Her credentials were on the dark web, easy picking for this hacker who just so fortuitously, when he hacked her page, because she was an administrator on our corporate account, got access to McAfee's corporate page. I share this with you because McAfee defends hundreds of millions of customers around the world. Yet even we are not immune from a cyber attack. And I will tell you, when the attack happens, time is not on your side. In fact, research shows that when a real breach happens, when financial records are at stake, PII records are at stake for your company, by the time your company identifies that there's been a breach, on average, 6 months have passed where that attacker has been in your environment. So by the time you get the phone call, if you're like the average, that attacker has been in your environment 6 months. So not only is time not on your side, you're on borrowed time. What I'm going to share today 7 tips that I want to give you for a comms readiness plan that hopefully many of you are practicing today and it validates, but if you're not alone. And I hope this gives you something actionable that you can deploy when you return to the office. The first is, the law is your minimum standard. There's lots of laws governing what your notification process needs to be and how quickly you need to notify, particularly when financial records, healthcare records, or otherwise personally identifiable information is at risk. I would submit that's the minimum standard. Your response plan, however, should mirror your brand and cultural values. Let me give you an example. Our particular hack required no legal notification. No records were compromised. McAfee wasn't compromised. Our account on LinkedIn was compromised. We were under no obligation to report. And in fact, because it happened on Easter Sunday, the news that got picked up about it was very niche in a couple of trade journals overseas. Many would say we dodged the bullet of being embarrassed as a newly minted company, right? But we had a problem. And that is, one of our cultural values is to practice inclusive candor and transparency. And we knew that employees in that moment had their LinkedIn profiles defaced as well with that graphic image I was just describing earlier. And while many didn't even know what happened, we knew we had to live our value and practice it at its core. And it's hard to be transparent when the news is bad. So I consulted with our chief HR officer, and we both mutually decided we have no choice but to live by the higher standard we have set for ourselves for the company. And though we were not required to report it, we featured an intranet story that Monday morning, letting all 7,500 employees know of what happened, how we remediated it, apologized for it affecting them, and encouraging them to update their passwords and enable multi-factor authentication on their accounts. Could that have leaked the story further? Could that have spawned something from it? Absolutely, it could have. But that was a risk we knew we had to take because we hold ourselves to the standard of the culture and the brand that we want to be, not what the law requires us to be. Get executive buy-in before the hacker gets you. Oh my goodness. When you're going in the throes of this and your mind is going a million miles a minute, this is not the time to want to try to get executive buy-in of what are we going to say, how are we going to notify, what do we need to do. And mind you, as bad as this was, because it was publicly embarrassing, especially for me, it could have been so much worse when financial records are compromised and time really is not on your side. You do not want to be in the situation of then trying to caucus your executive team to say, how conservative do we want to be? How liberal do we want to be? Do we want to offer something free like identity protection service? How quickly do we want to notify even when we might not have all the information? You want to have that buy-in well in advance, at the ready, before you're ever attacked, so that you can quickly execute and mobilize again when you're on borrowed time. And on that plan, it must be a collaborative process between comms, legal, and technical employees of your company. I cannot stress this enough. This is not an echo chamber exercise. You must have buy-in from all parties around the table. 60% of breach victims who are dissatisfied with the response cite that the response is either too lengthy, too techy, or too filled with legalese. Your job sitting around that table is to represent the brand and to make sure you're representing the message of what will be clear, concise, and actionable for the users impacted. Your response must not only stand up in the court of law, but in the court of public opinion, which is why it takes a team effort to figure out what exactly that response should be. And I really wish I could give you the ideal response, ladies and gentlemen. Sadly, I can't, because not all hacks are created equal. You might find yourself the victim of one of your corporate profile pages being hijacked like I did. You might find yourself the victim of ransomware, where your employees can't access data or you can't access customer records. You might find yourself the victim of a breach, where financial records are absconded. Each of these requires different response tactics, depending on the severity of the attack. And only you can determine what the severity of that attack is based on the risk tolerance of your company. When you do, you want to understand intimately how you would respond. I will tell you, write up the copy. Write up the email copy that you would send, the direct mail copy, the website copy, the PR drawer statement, the copy you would give your call center agents to answer questions. Obviously, some of it would need to be filled in depending on exactly what happened, but if you know based on the threat vector what you would say and how you would say it, you can get those legal approvals and technical approvals well in advance so that when it happens, you're ready to execute. Fill it in and go. Also, get your TikTok ready for each kind of severity of attack. What do you do in minute 1? What do you do hour 1? What do you do in the first day? 60%, again, another 60% of breach victims say that their assessment of the company's response dramatically increases if it's seen as immediate. And I can assure you, the number one question you will likely get from a journalist after it is public is, when did you know about it? And what did you do as soon as you found out? Having these TikTok schedules in place so that you and your company have already vetted what you're comfortable doing will again allow you to immediately leap into action instead of deliberating these very hard questions where you need time to assess the pros and cons. Fifth, be inclusive in your scope when you think about your comms plans. My attack is a great one because most companies might not naturally think about website defacement as one of the possible ways an attacker could get you. And for no other reason than there's often not a legal requirement to disclose it. So if your company is thinking, as they might be, very legalistically about this, they might only focus their attention on things like the traditional garden variety breaches, as I call them. There are a lot of other breaches out there that are reputation harmers. And the irony is, you as the marketing and comms professionals for your organization are responsible for making sure you're thinking about this because it likely rests in your purview. Prevent what you can with marketing third parties. McAfee isn't the first, and we certainly won't be the last company compromised because of a third party having their credentials stolen. In fact, Verizon reports that 80% of breaches occur, or at least can be traced back to, weak or compromised accounts and passwords. We immediately, as you might imagine after that happened, did a full inventory of every marketing third party with whom we do business. Practice good password management. Make sure only those who need to be administrators are administrators. Make sure they practice multi-factor authentication if they have access to your corporate credentials and site. And what we did as a result of this particular hack is, rather than consolidate our social media spending through one agency to make buys for us across the platforms, we changed that and started going to each of the platform providers individually to make our buys. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, when you find yourself the victim of that kind of hack, you want no question as to how much money your company invests with that platform, so that you can negotiate upfront better SLAs for response when that day happens. And last but not least, practice makes perfect. I would encourage you to run drills at least twice a year. Get your comms engine into a muscle memory of how to respond, and then measure your effectiveness after you run the drill. Use that as an opportunity to vet by your executive team. Do those conditions, those guiding principles, the severity of attacks that we've thought about, do those assumptions still stand? Or has something changed that we need to either be more conservative or more liberal so we can pivot? It also gives you an opportunity over those 6 months, because breaches are somewhat commonplace these days, unfortunately, to take a look at how others have responded in those 6 months and learn what to do and, frankly, what not to do, so that you can continue to finesse your own plan so that when it happens to you, you're that much more capable of responding. I said in the abstract, there's only 3 certainties in life that I know of: death, taxes, and hacks. Luckily, you can prepare for all three. And I can tell you, with 600,000 new threats detected each day, nearly 7 a second by McAfee Labs alone, it's not a matter of if, but when your number is called. You may even be a victim right now and just not know it yet. When that day comes, your company is going to count on you to have competence and a cool head to enact a very effective comms plan that prevents the hacker from stealing your company's most valuable asset, its reputation. Thank you so much.